Hi guys, this is Anna again, and I am here with Andrew Kerns. I just want to let you know that as a homeschooling parent and a businesswoman, I struggled the first time that I started diving into your curriculum.
Ah,
And I'm the kind of mama that, well, person, don't tell me I can't do something. I am going to figure it out because if I'm telling you, if a 12-year-old could do it, I should be able to do this, okay? But one of the things that I have to step back and realize is, okay, wait a minute. 50% came from my husband and 50% me, and we made these beautiful children
uh-huh.
that are extremely intelligent. And learning the lost tools was fabulous
Oh,
because
good.
it broke everything apart for them and could put it in a simple, concise way that there was better understanding, there was better clarity, and they
Good.
developed. And the younger you start, I didn't say this back then, I said all kinds of negative things, don't do that. But the younger you start with the lost tools, it just becomes everyday language. And
Oh,
for
yes.
me, I was in my 40s, so I had stubborn habits. We'll just,
Yeah.
and I had to break those habits. And so I'm very thankful. And you're one of the mentors that I had when I was homeschooling my children, and I really would encourage others to come along and learn more about what you have to offer. And so that's why I'm here today, learning about what you have to offer so you can share it with my audience.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. And I appreciate very much the point about the 50%, 50%,
Mm-hmm.
the straight line and the curvy line, the wholeness and the many parts, the analytical, the synthetic, all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
They're both so important. And we only have one childhood. And during
That's
that
true.
childhood, we develop all those habits. And if we become too unbalanced toward one side or the other,
Mm-hmm.
then it does become much harder the older we get to learn the other side.
And
Yeah.
then you just have to be stubborn.
Yes. Yes.
and, uh, really persistent. And
Well, thank you for being that way.
yes,
At least in this case.
in this case. Well, actually, I did it in math as well. I took
Good.
an algebra class 13 times.
Well, that'll do it.
And I still did not do well. However, when I got older, they offered a different type of class, and it was running a business.
Oh, yes.
And I got an A plus. And I went to my husband and said, "Is this school really a good school?" Because I got an A plus, and so it brings to the point, it's relevance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if
Mhm.
you're growing up with the lost tools and you start learning that at an early age, it's your thought process. It's how you gather information. It's how you deliver information. And so tell us how a parent could connect with you and
yeah.
what you have to offer, and what is a good way to start the program if you're a mom who's, well, now I'm almost 60, so
Yeah, I just turned 60. So,
great.
yeah. My 60 years are gone now. All I've got left is the 10. So how to connect with the Circe Institute? That's nice and easy. We have a website at circeinstitute.org. You can even email us at info@circeinstitute.org. You've been talking about the lost tools of writing, and that's our rhetoric program. It focuses on writing as it is so far designed. But it's really, I think a really crucial point about it that you've been indirectly emphasizing is it's not a subject.
Yeah.
You don't want to think about writing as a subject in school. It's an art. And as an art, every subject is influenced by it. Right? You can't do any subject in school without knowing how to think. Without practicing thinking. And it's not a matter of do they think or not, it's a matter of do they think well or not. And that takes a lifetime of practice. And the other thing is you can't think of something like writing or speaking or thinking as a subject, because you always have to do it. Whether it's life or school, you always have to do it. And so therefore we've keyed the lost tools of writing to decision making, because we're always making decisions.
Yes.
And so really what we're trying to do with the lost tools of writing is give students, yes, academic skills that will help them succeed in school, thinking skills, critical thinking skills, if you want to put it that way, although it goes beyond that, but also just making decisions in life. And the nice thing about it is when you're doing the lost tools of writing, you'll think about an issue in a book, in a narrative, in a story, and it won't matter, right?
Right.
The irony of relevance is that it does have to matter to the person personally, but not in the sense that it has to matter to their job or to their career or something like that, because very few kids care about that.
That's
And
true.
also not politics, right? So what we like them to do is think about whether Julius Caesar should have crossed the Rubicon, or whether Little Red Riding Hood should have followed the wolf. Was it a wolf or a fox? Wolf.
Wolf.
Because on the surface, that doesn't matter, right? And therefore it's safe to think about. I can think about whether Little Red Riding Hood should follow the wolf, because I'm not Little Red Riding Hood and I'm not being tempted by a wolf.
Right.
But then when you start thinking about it, you're learning how to make decisions like that. And as time passes, you start to realize, in fact, you are a Little Red Riding Hood, and there is a wolf out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a safer way to access the child's inner life. It's a safer way to access the stuff that really matters to the child. But it gives them time to, as it were, marinate in it. But at the same time, on the surface, you just feel like you're learning these practical skills about how to think. And so I don't know if that was really related to the question you're asking.
I love it because it gives them a better understanding. Because when you see the title Lost Tools of Writing,
Right.
you may think this is a writing course about
Like
a
a subject,
subject.
yeah.
And when I went through the training myself, it was a different sentence every week. And different subject every single week. And that, to me, like, this is not writing. It's learning to think.
That's right. It's a stealth program. We called it Lost Tools of Writing because you couldn't call it the Lost Tools of Teaching and the Lost Tools of Rhetoric and the Lost Tools of Thinking and the Lost Tools of Decision Making and how to choose a college all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the practical need is writing skills.
Right.
But it's not, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not a subject, right? It's not a thing that you have for a semester or a year and then you're done with it. It's an art, and it's an art of thinking. And every other area of knowledge, every other subject area, if you want to call it that, depends on whether you learn what the Lost Tools of Writing teaches. And therefore, it's the most effective, most practical program that you can possibly use, even though at first it seems like all you're learning how to do is write. And I'm not saying that that the only way to learn these things is through the Lost Tools of Writing. It's just that was the intention behind it, is to take those necessary skills and to put them in a program that you can actually get coached in and get practice with, so that it then will benefit everything else you do in school and in life and in Bible. I mean, we've had people talk about how they led Bible studies in their church using the tools, and that it was the best Bible studies they've ever participated in. So God be praised for that.
Yep. So how did you start this? How did we get here?
Now, do you mean with Circe's?
With Circe.
Or with this Lost Tools of Writing specifically?
With Circe.
Yeah.
Because Circe is more than just the Lost Tools of Writing. That's just how I was introduced to Circe.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a point there too, that's how you were introduced to Circe. When it comes to how did we get here, or how do other people get to where Circe is, if you like, there's a lot of paths. And the Lost Tools of Writing is definitely one of them. What happened, though, for me personally was in 1993, I helped start a school in the new classical, I prefer to call it a renewal, but in the classical renewal, I helped start a school. And immediately I started asking the question, what have I done? What is classical education? And so I started researching really almost obsessively. And for 30 years now, I've continued that research. And the Circe Institute sprang out of that. I started teaching high school students how to write and read. We did great books courses, and I would teach them what became the Lost Tools of Writing. I got asked to speak at conferences. Schools asked me to help them get started and work out the ideas, and that led to consulting. It led, as I say, to conference speaking. It led to the curriculum eventually, the Lost Tools of Writing, and we hope to do a lot more. And then over the years, I had to spread the workload, right? And you'll get to interview pretty soon Matt Bianco, who he's kind of the savior of the Circe Institute. He's the one who made us grow up. In a sense, to use the caricature, he brought us from being mom and pop to being a real enterprise, a mature enterprise. And now we have a consulting division, we have a teacher apprenticeship. And I should say about the teacher apprenticeship, that started in 2005, but when I say teacher, it's actually been a lot of homeschool parents in that. And that's because we don't think of teaching, maybe this is even a principle of all that we do. We don't start with the school and say, okay, here's the school, how did they do it? What little adjustments can we make? We start with the student and with how the student learns and the soul of the child. And really, I think it's safe to say that we mean to start with the student and Christ and the relationship between them. And then we say, what does that tell us about how a child learns? And we have found that to be exceptionally instructive. And it's, to go negative for a moment, I think the two things that get the least attention in the education establishment, generally speaking, are the student and Christ. And what gets a lot of attention is testing and publications and curriculum, that sort of thing. We've tried to go outside that. And so that's what led to the apprenticeship. And that's what led to, perhaps you could say, the oddness of how we do things. So over the last 30 years, through those different, I suppose, I mean, you might say flailing about. I like to think always with a compass, always headed north. We've developed a number of programs. I mentioned the apprenticeship. We have a national conference. We also have seasonal conferences now, 2 a year. We have done workshops in-house. We do teacher training in schools. We also do homeschool. Let's call them seminars or workshops on how to teach from a state of rest or restful teaching. Because this is going to drive your homeschooling moms crazy, but we believe that you should teach from a state of rest.
I have total agreement with that. And that's one of the reasons I decided, okay, I'm going to hit the road and have face-to-face conversations with people.
Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of money with a lot of different, like Dave Ramsey's. I've done everything Dave Ramsey to run my business. And then when I dove into classical conversations, I dove into classical conversations, and I really studied and learned. And then I got to a point that I could run a business and so now a lot of the clients and people that I work with, they're working or they're running a business. That may be a lot of people you're starting to see now.
Yes.
How do you serve those who we're working, we're running a house and we're, trying to homeschool our children, and it's home educate. We're not taking a school into the home. We're educating. And so a parent who wants to learn what you are teaching, how are you pivoting and handling that?
What a great question.
People coming.
The first thing I would say is, if you want to have a home education experience along with a home business, you have to believe in Jesus. And what I mean by that is not in an abstract way, not in an emotional way, but in a practical way. He said that if we seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, the other things will be added to us. And I think there's a tendency for us to abstract that and then put it over here, because it would be, in our age especially, because we're so pragmatic as opposed to practical, we tend to give Jesus his share over here, and then our business is here, and our home and our education is over here. And I think you've got to stop that, because that disintegrates your life. right? You've got to make the hearth and the central location of your family's life is the table, right? And Christ is seated at that table. And when we believe him and follow him, and he comes first, and we don't try to add him to things from the outside, then what happens is things get simple, right? He said, I don't mean easy, but they get simple.
Right.
He said, if you're weary and heavy laden, take my yoke upon you. And the implication is if you're weary and heavy laden, it's because you're carrying a different yoke than the one he's got for us. And it doesn't make us more productive. And practically then, what does that mean? Well, one thing it means is you don't sort of in a disconnected way buy a curriculum for how to run a business here and buy another curriculum for how to teach your children over here. And then another curriculum for what your children are going to learn. You start with Christ, and you start with Christ the Logos, Christ the Word, and you think about, okay, what does that mean that he is the Word? Well, one thing it means is language is really important.
Yes.
Right? And that's why we started with the Lost Tools of Writing. I would argue that the Lost Tools of Writing is one of the best tools you could possibly get for your family business, because it's all about decision making. And what does a business do? You make and enact decisions, right?
Yes.
And so in that sense, if you think of your business over here and your school over here, what you'll tend to do is they'll function separately, and they'll drive you crazy. They will drive you, because they'll be in conflict with each other. Now, they're different entities, right? Just like a husband and a wife are different entities, and so they drive each other crazy. There will still be need for resolution between the two. But at the same time, if you have a husband's in one house and a wife is in another house, that's kind of defeating the purpose.
Yes.
And I think that's analogous to if you have the business here and the education here. It defeats the purpose, or it defeats the potential. It undercuts the potential. There can be this magic, this wonderful interaction and flowing between them, if instead of having a super complicated subject-driven curriculum, you teach the core arts. We talk, writing, reading, and arithmetic in our culture, the 3 R's. I talk about 7 liberal arts. I think they're more complete and more valuable, but harder to get your head around. But if we're focused on that, what matters most, and then we order our family around Christ and daily rituals and routines and activities, then the business and the schooling and the education and the family life can be a holistic thing. Let me suggest a metaphor. It's more like a farm than it is like an industry, like a factory, right? In a farm, you don't have your job and then you go out to your job and then you come home. Now, you do have your field, but your field is part of your home,
Yes.
right? And so it's more integrated like a farm than it is disintegrated like the factory. And you want to get as close as you can to the farm instead of to the factory to keep the business and the education coordinated. And Christ enables that. And if you're wondering, well, can you go into all kinds of detail? The answer is not really, and the reason I can't is because you have to follow Christ yourself in your circumstances, and you have to figure out, based on your community, on your role, on your gifts, on your children's gifts, on the calling of God on your family, and what kind of church you're in, and all those different things. Those will determine the particularities. But if you pray, if you ask, He will answer, and if you seek, you will find. And so I don't mean that to be an evasion.
No.
I mean that as an expression of my conviction.
And it helped me develop who I am.
Good.
Because
Good.
I would get up very early in the morning and I spend time in the Word.
Yeah.
There is no way I could have educated my children without spending time in the Word.
Right.
One child was an ice skater and another a ballet dancer. Well, ice skating is very early in the morning and ballet dancing is late in the evening. And then I needed to drive twice a week,
right,
2.5 hours for ice skating.
Right.
So my daughter could ice skate. And so people would ask me, how can you homeschool? How can you you're going to Dallas all the time. How, and then you're at the ballet studio or a different studio, and how are you doing this all in one day? And it was because I was led and I heard what to do. And when I got in trouble, I leaned on my spouse because math and science is not something I'm going to do very well. I will try. I will give it my best. And so then I turned to my spouse. And it was very clear when I needed to do those things. And it was comfortable. But
Good.
I always told people, I'm always given the time. When I give time to the Lord, I have all the time I need to do the other things that need to be done. And our house was messy, never dirty, but kind of messy.
Lived in.
It was lived in. We lived in a home, and we had pets, and we had, plants and gardens, and we did those kinds of things living in the city. But it was all a part of our daily life.
Right.
We didn't keep it too separate. And I was just trying to think, there were some things that, we had to have different types of conversations with. My husband and I, we came from different backgrounds where if he was invited to a party, he'd go. And so when our kids were like, hey, can I go do this and this and this? I struggled academically. And so I'm like, no, the homework is not done. It has to get done first, because I struggled so much with it. And then realizing these children, it's 50 him, 50 me. We made it, the child wasn't struggling, and the child didn't struggle because we had a good